Welcome back to the Not Yet Adults podcast.
What? Raise the roof. You can't see us because it's an audio podcast, but we're raising the roof right now.
This, of course, is a podcast starring Collin Geffrey and myself, Eric Zayas, where we talk about adulthood and trying to figure all that out.
We are trying to figure that out, Eric. What are we trying to figure out today? What's our Northern Star for this episode?
Today, I thought we'd figure out weddings, our experiences with the weddings that we've been to, and I thought each of us would tell a story about a wedding we went to and how strange it is, the traditions, the ceremony, seeing people your age being married, getting married, or already being married, and seeing them have kids and stuff, and how that makes us feel, basically. Not to sound too much like a therapy session.
Dude, this whole show's a therapy session. It's fine. It's all good. It's very bizarre. I don't know. I think marriage as a whole is changing a lot, and the way that I think we're thinking about it, especially people in our generation, has kind of changed as far as time's gone on. But let's start with stories. How many weddings have you been to? I guess let's start there.
Well, I've only been to 2 weddings. They were actually, both people who got married were sisters. They're old family friends that we used to, back when I lived in Spanaway in Washington, my family used to live across the street from a family who had 2 daughters, and one summer one daughter got married and another summer another daughter got married, so it was back to back. I just want to talk about the wedding I went to for the second daughter. And I don't remember exactly. I know it was last summer, and I remember it being in the countryside, the Washington countryside. I remember it taking an hour to drive there in the heat with a suit on, and it was very uncomfortable. But when we went there, it could have been on a farmland. It looked like this big open field in the sunshine, and there was all these really nice decorations set out next to this I think it was a pond or something. It was a really special ceremony, and the weather was perfect. You could not have asked for better wedding weather.
I was going to say, it's good that the weather when you got there was good, but if it's in the middle of summer, I feel like there should be a rule that you have to have it in the city so no one has to drive more than 15 minutes. So it's an hour drive in wedding clothes. It's just,
It's these people are friends, are practically family, but do I love them that much?
Yeah, let's just mail them the gift. It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, I remember it almost sounds like a dream the way I'm explaining it, because when we were driving there, I remember I was reading the horror novel It by Stephen King on my Kindle on the way there, because I was there's a lot, it's going to take a long time there, and I need some time to I need to burn some time.
That's weirdly the most Eric thing I've ever heard of I'm at or going to a wedding, I'm going to read Stephen King's It. I don't know why, but that's just so inherently Eric to me.
It was a strange, now forever I will associate that wedding with that chapter of it that I read, and it was a very particularly nasty chapter. But we got there, we were a little bit late, so the ceremony had already started, and so we kind of ran in and we saw that everyone was sitting down, and we're okay, now we have to be super quiet because the ceremony started. We can't take our seats, so we're just awkwardly standing behind the chairs while the, I assume, priest is going through this person's reading their vows and this person reading their vows, and it was very sweet, very special. And we were kind of oh no, this is embarrassing, we're late, we're the only ones late. And then we saw more people come in and stand next to us, and we're okay, we're not the only ones late, and we're not the latest, so it's not that bad.
It's when you forget to do your homework and you're please tell me one of my friends also forgot so that we can just both, yeah, I'm sorry, we messed up. Yeah,
100%. I was with my mom and dad, and it was interesting because the priest kept pretty close to the traditional sort of stuff, the kind of things you see in I had only been to one other wedding before that, but the first wedding I went to, I was late to the ceremony and only made it to the reception. So this is the first time I was witnessing the ceremony of the wedding, and it was very, for the most part, or in many ways, it was similar to the kind of traditional wedding ceremony you see in movies or television shows, but which to me made it like stranger because those kind of seem like over dramatic and meant for, drama, like the priest saying, "If anyone has any objections, please stand up now."
And someone bursts through the door right there with a dramatic like declaration of love. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this big romantic moment. But in this version, the priest said, still kept that traditional part in there, but used it for a joke. He said, "If anyone has any objections, please sit down and shut up," or something, and everyone kind of laughed about it. And they just kept going, and it was really sweet. And then afterwards, yeah, there's the bride and groom stepped down, and then someone announced, that there's food, and we all kind of like took our places at tables, and I had to talk with a bunch of people I didn't know, because literally the only people I knew besides the bride's family were like strangers, and that was strange. Also, there were a bunch of kids running around. I forgot, like, this is something you don't see in the movies, how many kids are at a wedding, and like how it's like, because it's a family thing and they're not gonna leave the kids at home because like that'd be kind of messed up. It was just like it was almost like going to like Disneyland or something. There's just a bunch of kids running around.
Kids are the worst, man. I understand some people want to have kids or have always wanted to have kids or even have kids. That's great. Like I hope I never have kids. It is the worst thing to me when you're going somewhere and you're trying to have a conversation and there's just screaming, mad, angry little germ factories running around. Like I can't stand it.
A little harsh.
I'm sorry. Like once you get to like, I don't know, 11 or 12, and it's like, okay, you're a person. I can sit down and have a conversation with you now. But like before that, kids are just annoying. And I say this as a former kid. I was super annoying. Like, I
Yeah, we're all former kids, Colin.
Yeah, I'm not, well, some of us.
It's not just you.
I'm pretty sure I was the only person who used to be a kid. I made it out. I was one of the lucky ones. But no, I don't know. I just, especially at a wedding, I feel like don't bring the kids. Have a 21 and up or an 18 and up wedding. Like don't.
I've heard of people doing that, and it just seems like, as awesome as it may seem for like the bride and groom, I kind of thought that it would be sort of like rude as like a friend of the family or another family member, maybe a sibling who has kids, to get a wedding invitation and then read like no kids allowed, only.
Well, I feel like for people our age or just a little bit older, like it's treated less as a ceremony and more for the reception afterwards. It's more just like a party with all your friends, and you get a nice venue and maybe get people to perform or a DJ or whatever, and then it's just like a party with a bunch of people. And obviously then, like, if you're serving adult beverages or whatnot, you're not going to want a bunch of 6-year-olds running around. So I can kind of sympathize with that. But
the way I feel about kids, I don't mind them too much. And I do want kids. I want to be a parent when I get older.
You're out of your mind, Eric. You're absolutely out of your mind.
I'm part of the majority of people aren't insane. But it is, yeah, it's definitely like, it just kind of threw me back because I think of a wedding as like an adult like ceremony, and then you see a bunch of kids and it's like, oh, I forgot that people have families and stuff like that. Just something I didn't consider. Luckily, these kids were pretty well behaved. I think one started like crying a little bit during the ceremony, and their parents did the awesome parent thing and like took their kid away to like wait till they calm down. Which some parents, during public events where kids are crying, won't do that and will just like sit with it. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, like I get that you want to enjoy this too, but like, there you have like a person that's making a lot of noise with you, and you gotta like, let them have their moment away.
The second you walk in the door with your kid, that's great. You're a good parent. You didn't leave your kid alone. However, you have now accepted responsibility for anything and everything that kid is going to do. And it is now your job to fix it. When that kid messes something up, and they will, fix it. That's your job now.
You're the fixer.
You're the fixer. And that was your choice when you had the kid. I'm sorry, I'm sounding super harsh just because for the sake of comedy, I'm kind of hamming it up a little bit. But honestly, I feel like kids at weddings, it's just there's a time and a place. And
yeah, I don't know. It was. I think it can be kind of sweet when there's like a ring girl or like when you include the kids in the ceremonies. But I don't remember particularly if they did that this time. But I remember one thing I do remember though was near the end of the. When the like after we had eaten the dinner portion and stuff, there were like like 7 different kinds of cakes, and we all got to like have like a slice of one, and that was pretty dope. I remember the food for sure. I remember there was like a German chocolate cake and like an angel cake or something, and like a lot of different types of cakes. That was pretty sweet. There wasn't just one big wedding cake. There were like 7 different like normal size cakes that everyone can like sample.
See, that's kind of an interesting choice because, like, visually, you don't have the nice, big, multi-tiered wedding cake, but also, like, that's accommodating to everybody there. So that's kind of a cool move. I feel like.
I agree. What was your? I understood the impression that you have a wedding story. What was your experience like?
Yeah, so I've been to, I want to say 3 weddings in my life, but only 2 that I really remember because I was a young kid at the first one. So the one I'm going to talk about was, I'm going to say 4 or 5 months ago. And it was while we were at PLU, and a friend of mine that I'd had almost every class in the business program with for the 2 years I was at PLU, got engaged and was getting married. And so she invited me and 2 other classmates, which I felt honored about because it was like she didn't invite that many people. And so we all kind of carpooled over there, me and my 2 other classmates. And we got there and we found out that my friend who's getting married, she's from Vietnam. And we already knew that. But what we didn't know is literally everyone else at the wedding was her family from Vietnam that had flown over and didn't speak a word of English. And so we were there with like, I'm going to say 95% of the people there, I don't think spoke English. And so it was very interesting because on the one hand, we were there for a friend and we were, happy to celebrate, and it was a really, really nice ceremony and everything. But on the other hand, like, we just had no freaking clue what was going on half the time. And what was really interesting was after, I think it was her uncle that officiated the wedding. After he would say each step of the process, they had an English speaker there that would relay it back to basically the 3 of us that only spoke English. And so it would be like...
You had your own personal translator?
Right, but it would go like 60 seconds of them speaking in Vietnamese, and we're like, okay, we don't really know what's happening. And then the translator would go on and say it again. And so it was kind of interesting. But no, it was very, I'd say small. Not like eloping, but there's probably only about 40 people there. It was not in a church. I don't think there was a pastor or anything present that I can remember. But yeah, that was more, I don't know. It was interesting because I personally have always kind of had this feeling about weddings of like, I'm happy for them, but I don't really have any interest in going. It's just not the kind of thing I would enjoy. There's all this, mingling and seeing people you don't really know. And that's just not something that I enjoy that much. And for me, it was actually very, very enjoyable because it was, my friend that I've known for 2 years getting married to, the love of her life. And I was like, I'm really, really happy for my friend. This is a cool experience to kind of, witness them going through. And that was really cool to me. And I feel like that's something that when I have, like, the other wedding I went to was a family friend, and like I was happy for them, but I just didn't have that feeling of pride or kind of appreciation for it because I was just like, well, yeah, older people get married. That's what happens. But when someone my age was getting married, I was like, wow, this is like a very big step in their life that is someone who's, more or less my peer. And that was a really interesting experience. But no, it was really cool. I'm glad I went, and I wish I had, read up on Vietnamese a little bit before I did. But
were there like noticeable cultural differences in how the ceremony kind of unfolded that you noticed?
Not that I noticed. Like she walked into, I don't know the name of the song, but it's very popular. It was a English song, like something 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 marry you. I don't know what the song's called, but it was like the songs were all English speaking songs, and the ceremony obviously they translated and stuff. I didn't really notice any big cultural differences. It was pretty much just entrance ceremony, and then we took pictures and had food, and that was pretty much it.
Interesting. Yeah, there was one like cultural difference I noticed with the first wedding I had been to. It was the family, we were friends with our Filipino, and they did something, I think this was actually at both weddings, that was really interesting. There's a part where and this may be true of all Filipino weddings, I'm not sure, but there's a part where the bride and groom stand close, and the priest pastor, I don't know the name of the person officiating the wedding, ties a rope around them, and then explains that this symbolizes basically the unity of this marriage. And then of course he unties it at some point, but he ties. But it's just like it's a really neat symbol, and it's also very. I thought it was a very cool, like, simple metaphor for like the idea of it. Weddings are strange with the like the traditions and like the what is it called? Something borrowed, something blue, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue.
Yeah, borrowed blue, old and new. Yeah. I don't know. It's and like there's all these superstitions that go around it of, the groom's not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony, and like you mentioned,
Or they'll die.
Jesus, they'll just explode right there. That's scary.
Is that not the tradition?
I have no idea. I just know that you're not supposed to see them. I didn't know there was any like spontaneous explosions going on. That's scary. It's interesting to me that apart from these superstitions, I feel like there's all this work to make it like the perfect day. Like it's essentially a production. And you and I have a little bit of experience with that of building a show and building a production from start to finish. And I feel like there's all this stress and expectation to make it the best experience for everyone there, that it can be easy as the bride and groom to forget that, hey, it's your day. Like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, really matter who enjoys it and who doesn't, so long as you're getting what you need to out of this. I don't know. I feel like everyone's like, I want to have the wedding. I want to have the nicest this and the nicest that. And I want everyone to, have all this great stuff. And it's like, well, are you happy? I mean, are you doing this for you, or are you doing this so everyone else can admire you?
That's something that kind of bothers me about weddings. I'm not against the idea of it. I actually really like the idea of like marriage, and like I think wedding is a really neat ceremony to like celebrate the love of a couple with their families. But something that disappoints me about it is how much pressure the bride and groom are under and put themselves under or under by their families to have such a fantastic ceremony, to have it be like perfect, to also like accommodate all their like friends and family who maybe don't get along, and figure out how to like minimize like the drama that happens between friends and family that are unrelated to the marriage, or maybe are related to the marriage but shouldn't affect the ceremony.
I mean, anytime a family has had a Thanksgiving or a Christmas get together, that putting together a lot of family can often put everyone in really high stress situations.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Bringing those all together for a wedding, and on top of that, you have the restraints of your budget, and whatever venue you've chosen can only accommodate so many people. And then you get to the point of, who do I invite? Who do I not invite? What friends do and don't make the cut? Do I invite the second cousins, even though we only talk at Christmas? All this stuff that at the end of the day, you as the people getting married shouldn't really have to worry about.
Yeah, that's what like bothers me about weddings. The two people who are basically celebrating their love and should be only happy kind of have to stress over things that are seemingly menial for like any other day, but like during that day it all comes to a head, and it's all like multiplied basically.
And then it's suddenly just over. Like, I mean, you have photos and videos and stuff like that. But, and again, I guess this is like production, but it's all this work and all this time and all this preparation building up to this one day or this one night. And then suddenly a few hours later, it's just gone. It's over. That's it. And that's what's so crazy to me about all the money people put into weddings. Of like, I understand that, knock on wood, you only get married once, but like, that's just crazy to me. People spend tens of thousands of dollars on these, lavish big weddings. And once you get the food and the venue, and if you have people playing music and stuff, that's not that hard to spend a bunch of money. So it's, I don't know, man. It's a very weird thing.
It's also so strange to see people like, I mean, we already like kind of touched on this, but to see people our age getting married, that will always freak me out.
Oh my God, yeah. Like here we are, just graduated. I mean, not yet adults. Wink, wink, wink. We're figuring things out, and there's people that are our peers that are like, "Hey, I just got married," or "Hey, I'm having kids," or "I'm moving across the country for work," or whatever. Very, very bizarre seeing that. I have a friend on Facebook that my graduating class, known her since I don't know, like middle school or something, and she just had her first kid and is married. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, and that's not any shade against her. Like, I'm very, very happy for her. That's incredible. But just to think that someone has gone through all of that at our age when we're still living in our parents' house.
There's some people like our age that have seemingly experienced so much more life or like life experiences with relationships and like are taking on new responsibilities that I'm like I still feel are for me haven't happened yet or are in kind of a distant future.
And like I know at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that I'm behind or that they're ahead. It just means that we're living our own separate lives. But at the same time, it's very, very weird to think about that, how different would things have to have gone for me to be married and having a kid already. Like there is a universe where that happened. And that's really scary to think about because that is just such a foreign, unfathomable thing for me to have almost ever, especially now.
Yeah, for me it makes me feel kind of a little bit behind the curve to an extent. Not that I'm disappointed that I'm not married with kids right now, but I feel like in at least in terms of like relationships, I'm still a little bit behind and unknowledgeable as when compared to other people who have married their high school sweetheart or something, or I run into at my work and I see them with their wife and kids, and I'm like, oh hey, I remember you from high school. Hey, that's your your whole family. Holy crap! Like I mean, obviously I don't say that to them, but that's what I'm thinking.
You say it out loud. Holy crap, you're married? What happened? Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned kind of this idea of being behind the curve or not having that much experience when it comes to relationships. I feel like that more often than not is going to help you than hurt you. Because I feel like if you're going into a relationship with all this baggage of, hey, I have a kid, or hey, I've been married or engaged before, or whatever, that, especially if someone hasn't shared that experience, can be a lot to take into a relationship. So I feel like having too little experience is always going to be better than having too much. Um, but I mean, there is something to be said about figuring out a relationship for the first time. That's a hard thing. So Eric, kind of switching gears, I feel like you and I, both connoisseurs of film and television and all these things, by which I mean we just sit in the basement and watch them way too much, particularly in TVs and in film. There's kind of this unrealistic portrayal of weddings of like they're the one special day and they're the culmination of all these plot points and often they're a season finale or whatever. And it's kind of all this pressure is riding on it. Like, this is it. This has to be it. And then, and I mean, we can talk about this more, but I feel like in my experience in reality, they're often very anticlimactic and very just kind of play out as you would expect. And, there's not really that big moment that you're going to talk about or think about. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about our expectations of what weddings are supposed to be versus, how they actually pan out?
Well, I think this is more true of like women than men, what I'm about to say next. And I think there's actually been like certain cases of depression that have been caused by this, but there's so much pressure put on your special day that when it's over, like there's this sort of feeling of like, oh well, that was my happily ever after, now what's next, what's the next thing. Like a lot of movies and television shows, like that is everything leads up to that, and when that's over you see the happy couple walk off into the sunset and then it's over.
And in real life, like they don't walk off into the sunset, they go walk off and have to live the rest of their life now.
Yeah, and that's just the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new one. I think I've heard that there are cases of post marital depression, I think it's called, or post nuptial depression, where a couple typically like the one in the relationship, because women generally are more pressured for like to get married and like are taught that marriage is like the big like moment in their life, so that when it's over they kind of get like these depressive feelings. And it's strange that after the happiest day of your life to be so sad, but it's because like it's just the end of a big chapter. And it's like when you read a huge like book series, when it's over you're like get the sense of like, what do I do now this thing I've invested so much time to has ended, and well, what's next now that like there's nothing to, or there feels like there's nothing to work towards because we've already accomplished it.
This one's kind of a walk, but I feel like it's related. My sister is a ballet dancer. She has been for about 8 years, and she's very, very good at it. She loves it a lot. And about once a year, she has her big show that they rent out just a gorgeous theater downtown, and they have I don't know, probably about 60 dancers in it, and they fly in professionals from out of state and all this stuff. It's a very big deal. And they spend probably 7, 8, 9 months rehearsing for this thing, leading up and just getting everything perfect. And she always describes it as the night of the show is the best night of her life, followed by the day after is the worst day of her life, because suddenly all of this work and time and energy and love and blood and sweat and tears is put into one day. And what do you do when basically your identity, or at least a very large part of it, is defined by this one event, and then that event ends? Like, where do you go from there? Where do you put all that work and time and effort that was going into that thing? And I feel like that's kind of how weddings are for a lot of people, or production or shows or whatever it may be. It's that feeling of what now? Of like, all I could think of was getting to this day, and now I'm here or even past it. And what do I do now? And that could be something that's really hard to come to terms with.
Yeah. And in regards to like movies and like television shows, the wedding is like this big romantic climax that's always represented as this like strange event. Like, obviously there are comedies like Wedding Crashers and whatnot, which make the wedding seem like this series of comedic foils. But even just like a show like Grey's Anatomy, like the wedding is like this huge thing that will make or break someone's like life seemingly, and when in reality it's just a pinpoint in your life rather than the like finishing line, so to speak.
Yeah, and I feel like, obviously neither you or I have been married, but I feel like the actual wedding is
that you know of.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eric, I know it's been divorced 3 times already, but no, I feel like the wedding is more to symbolize how you already feel about each other. It's like, I don't think your relationship, and maybe people who have been married can correct us, I don't know, but I don't feel like the relationship the day before the wedding was that different than it was after the ceremony. I feel like it's more just, we've gotten to the point in our relationship and that we are committing to each other in a way that the world or the country or the people around us kind of universally acknowledge as the next chapter, the final step or whatever. Even if our relationship hasn't necessarily changed or progressed any more than it has a day ago or a week ago, we're taking this step to show everyone else how serious we are. And I don't know. I just feel that maybe there's a little too much pressure on that. And I don't know. Not entirely sure where I'm going with this, other than just, I feel like there's all this pressure taken of like, that's the ultimate step,
My like dream, like for the future of weddings, which is a strange sentence to say, is I wish that they would be like less of a big climactic moment in people's life and more of a casual event, like you said, like a party. They should be just a party to celebrate someone's love, rather than like, let's get all of our friends and family from all over the world to like look at us for our 15 minutes of fame. I wish it was just like I feel like more people should get what's the term when you like, it's not like an official marriage, or it is an official marriage, but it's like eloped. Yes, eloped. I feel like more people should have like eloped parties.
I feel like I think some people go through their life just like knowing things that are going to happen to them. And I don't mean like at a supernatural level, but I feel like some people just know, I'm going to have kids at some point. I'm going to get married at some point. I have never felt that I'm going to get married or have kids. That's just, and who knows, life's long, but I've never felt like that's going to happen to me. That said, were I to ever get married, I think I would just elope. I think it would be, I care about this person. I want to commit my life to them. And you know what? This day, as much as I care about these other people in my life, this day is not really for them. It's for us. So why don't we save this money, have a special moment with us, and just go do it and get it done,
I think you'd save so much money. You can spend that on like the honeymoon. You could travel. You could like, go to Wild Waves.
Getting them a $10,000 diamond ring. Like, do you know how many computers I could build you with that? Like, Jesus Christ. Just, I don't understand. I mean, I understand the gesture behind them. I understand things like engagement rings or wedding ceremonies or whatever. I understand what they symbolize. That said, there is so many better practical uses of those monies. Every single one of the monies.
You can use those monies for so many other things.
popsicles. You get 30,000 popsicles instead of having whatever. It's kind of a gesture that's maybe becoming a little more hollow than it used to be.
Or at least a little archaic, you know. I mean, it's a tradition that's lasted, I don't know how long, but it's lasted like probably thousands of years. Well, I don't know, hundreds to thousands of years, somewhere in that gap of time.
People have been getting married for 50 or 60 years at least.
People have been getting married for literally dozens of years. Just a lot of dozens. And so it's a tradition that's obviously hasn't gone away, but you know, I think my hope is that future generations understand that elements of it are archaic and the pressure behind it isn't healthy or really beneficial. And my dream is that it to some extent gets streamlined.
I totally agree. And I know we are kind of brushing up against the clock, but that did bring up something that I also want to mention. On the subject of kind of streamlining, what are your thoughts on second weddings or third weddings or people getting married again after the fact? How do you feel about that?
I've never heard of that. I've heard of like vows being renewed, and actually my uncle and aunt on my dad's side had their vows renewed, and that was like a wedding-esque ceremony. But I've never heard of second or third weddings. That sounds like people just trying to burn money.
Sorry, I don't think I communicated it very well. By that, I mean, like, someone marries someone, and then either they get divorced or someone dies or whatever, and they get married again years later to someone else. At that point, I feel like it's just like, couldn't you just run off and just get it done? Really? We had to go through all this work again? Like, really? That's kind of how I feel about the whole thing.
I feel like at that point, it's more for the person who, unless they're both getting married again, I feel like one of them's probably getting married for the second time, the other one's getting married for the first time, and it's more for the benefit of the person getting married for the first time because they want to have a wedding, whereas for the first person, whatever, you know what I mean, person who's getting married the second time, they're probably like, I've done this before, I've already had this ceremony, but like this isn't for me at that point.
That's fair, I guess. Maybe I just need to be more empathetic, I don't know, but like I was at a wedding about a week ago, and the person we were there for, the family friend, had been married once before, I believe. And I couldn't help but to think a couple times there, like, really, you couldn't have just sent us a postcard saying he got married? Like, we had to go through all this. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just too cynical. I'm not sure. But well, Eric, I think we covered weddings pretty well. I think we can mark that one off the list. We solved it. We figured out marriage. It's done. We cracked the code.
We've broke it down to its core elements, and now we never have to talk about it again.
Never have to talk about it again. And anyone out there, you now have our blessing to get married. We walked you through the whole process, so it's perfect. Well, folks, we would love to plug all of our social medias and let you know where you can find us across the internet. But first, my dear Eric, is there anything you want to say to the people out there?
If you're thinking about getting married, you want to save money, just get eloped.
Yeah, just get eloped, man. Invite us. We'll be your witnesses.
Screw your friends, screw your family who are like, you have to have a big thing. Like, nah, just go to Vegas or even not Vegas, just go to a courthouse and say, hey, we'd like to sign the paperwork.
Or don't. Maybe have the big ceremony, but do it because you want to have it. Don't do it because everyone around you wants you to have it.
Also, don't take the advice of two random guys from the internet who tell you what not to do or what not to do.
That's maybe the only piece of advice you should take from this whole thing is don't listen to us. This is less us trying to tell you what to do and more us just talking ourselves through, life. Alrighty. Well, folks, this has been episode 7 of the Not Yet Adults podcast. Remember, you can find our podcast every Monday and Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and all across the interwebs on podcast services of your choice. If there's a service you use or listen to that we are not on, let us know. Reach out. We would love to get on there. We want to make this podcast as easy for you to listen to as possible. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Not Yet Adults, as well as our own subreddit, which is r/NotYetAdults. Check that out. We would really appreciate it if you can follow us or interact with us on any of our accounts. It means the world to us because you mean the world to us as well.
Aww.
We should get married, Eric. You and me should have a wedding, and then we'll chronicle the whole experience, and then do a podcast about it, and then divorce the day after, and we can do another podcast about that, and just get the.
I feel like that would look suspicious. People listening would be like, oh, they only got married and divorced for content.
Is this kind of like when someone takes out a life insurance policy on someone and then like murders them like a month later?
It's a little different. It's exactly like that.
Alrighty. Well, folks, if you've ever taken out a life insurance policy on someone and then murdered them, let us know in the comments below. Until next time, Thank you for listening, and good luck getting married, I guess.